Story 1. I heard a technician tell our service manager, "I am going to take the rest of the day off for my mental health and for your physical health." He is still employed, and I have kept that remark in mind. Story 2. There have been many times in multiple jobs when I wasted time or used social media at work. Then suddenly, a task was not completed, and my boss would ask why. I would say, "I was so overwhelmed," and they would always believe me. Story 3. Went to the club on a Tuesday and stayed until closing at 4 a.m., got home around 5 a.m., remembered I had to open the bank the next day at 7 a.m. with the manager. Did not sleep, got dressed and went straight there. Smelled up the entire vault with tequila. 10 minutes after the bank opened, I went to the upstairs bathroom to vomit, then proceeded to pass out. The manager knocked on the door, woke me up, and sent me home. Did not get fired. Story 4. I once accidentally hit reply all to a company-wide email asking for vacation requests and wrote, "I'm about to fake a funeral for this time off." My manager responded with, "Approved. Please don't kill anyone. I am still employed." Story 5. My boss walked in with the ugliest hat ever. Being the genius I am, I said, "Ah, that's how you know you're the boss. You've been here for an hour and not one person has made fun of that ridiculous hat. I really don't know how I didn't get fired." Story 6. During my first week on the job, my boss was introducing me to people in the different departments. We went into the main server room. As he introduced me to the information technology staff, someone came through the door, and I jumped backward to avoid being hit. My back hit the emergency shutoff button used in case of fires or similar emergencies and shut down everything immediately. Took nearly 3 days to get the servers back up and all the data restored. I did not get in any trouble because it was clearly an accident. In fact, soon after, they placed a plastic box over the button that had to be lifted before the button could be pressed. Until the day I left the company 10 years later, they called that box the Ryan Cage after me. Story 7. Deleted an entire national inventory database. Luckily, I had an unauthorized backup on a drive on my desk, so I replaced the whole database in 20 minutes. Story 8. Had an enterprise router down. Accidentally reflashed the wrong router and took another 1,500 customers down. Realized it and informed my boss that I made a mistake. My boss laughed and said, "Thanks for taking responsibility for it. Are they both back up?" "Yes." "Okay. Good work, but be more careful next time." Story 9. Big-time corporate company. I flirted seriously with the recruiter and human resources representative at the job fair, got an interview, and was eventually hired. We continued to awkwardly flirt over the next year or two. She became my human resources representative, so intensely that we made a few other coworkers uncomfortable. Joke's on them though. We will be married 15 years in November, and I still flirt with her all the time. Story 10. In the early 1980s, one of my first jobs was working at a gas station that offered full service. Long story short, I filled a lady's diesel Mercedes-Benz with gasoline. I felt like a moron, but fortunately, I caught my error before she tried to start her car. She insisted that I suffer no consequence and paid for her own towing and repair. It turns out that this very nice lady was also an older woman attracted to younger men. Story 11. A coworker sent a company-wide email stating that he would be coming in after lunch. I replied to him, insinuating that he was finally getting circumcised. I started hearing random giggles and people coming up to me saying, "Good one." To my horror, I realized I had replied to all. I went to IT to see if they could retract my email, but they laughed and said no. I was very nervous for the rest of the day, but nothing happened. Story 12. Not me, but a friend. I've shared this before so people might recognize the story. My friend worked for a consulting company that provided automation services for factories. At the time, he was assigned to work at a beer manufacturing company, one of the largest in North America. The task was simple: swap out a temperature sensor and update the program accordingly. However, he got a little ambitious and thought he could optimize the code. He deleted some parts, rewrote others, applied the changes, saved the program, clocked out, and went home. Job well done, right? Well, no. Something he did in the code caused it to stop accepting reports from the temperature sensors. As a result, several large vats of fermenting beer overheated, killing the yeast. He effectively ruined somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 gallons of beer. He somehow did not get fired. Instead, he was let go from that job and immediately reassigned to a different position in another province. The new job was monitoring the water pumps at the bottom of a potash mine. He was essentially punished by being sent to the mines. Hilarious. But how he didn't get fired after the beer incident, I have no idea. Story 13. My coworker who trained me gave me tasks to do besides the main help desk roles. One task was installing monitoring software across different servers to receive alerts about hard drive space, temperatures, CPU usage, and other metrics. I ran into a problem and found the program already installed. Without checking the server name, I asked my trainer what to do. He said to uninstall and reinstall. I uninstalled it from the home server, which is a 5-hour process to set up but takes only 5 seconds to remove completely. Story 14. I wrote, "Help me. I'm trapped at Little Caesar's Pizza, on the top of a pizza box when I was in high school folding boxes at the start of my shift. It made it to the customer and he called the store. Everyone laughed, and I was told I was lucky they did not call the police." 1996. Story 15. Not necessarily all on me. I used to work silkscreen, and we used to do a bunch of fraternity and sorority t-shirt runs. The client supplied the artwork, and my boss would create the positives to burn the screens. I printed about 300 of them. When the client came to pick them up and my boss showed her, we realized they said, "Some dance to remember, some dance to forget." The girl had made the error, my boss had recreated the error, and I had looked at them for about 3 hours printing them, but none of us had registered the misspelling. I think we gave them to her for half off. Story 16. Not me, and I hope he does not see this, but a former coworker had a reputation though he was not fired. 2 memorable incidents led to this reputation. He was transporting an iMac upright on a cart, the kind usually used for classroom projectors. Leaving the elevator, a wheel dropped into the gap slightly, causing the iMac to tip over and fall off the cart. Another time, he was cleaning a laptop and grabbed a can of compressed air from the shelf. He sprayed it all over the keyboard and screen before realizing it was WD-40. The substance actually got into the screen. Story 17. I downloaded torrents at work. I had just started my job and was still in college. I would be given tasks during the day and come in late at night to work on them. Since no one was there and the internet connection was decent, I used my laptop from school to download movie torrents all night. The company was notified by their internet provider, and I received a stern warning. My supervisor even wrote me up and put a permanent letter in my record that could affect future advancement. About a year later, everyone except me was fired in my department, including the supervisor who reprimanded me. 10 years later, I am still here and the only one left. I work full-time from home now, so I can download torrents whenever I want. Story 18. When I worked nights at the plant on a 12-hour shift, my assistant and I would buy a box of chicken and co-op Borderlands, Gears of War, Halo, and many others for approximately 11 hours of the 12-hour shift. The bosses were happy and wished us a good night when we showed up the next evening for the night shift. Somehow, I don't believe it was a dumb thing. Story 19. Through those little snaps sound exploding rocks out of a 5th-floor window into the work courtyard at people who walked through. Little did we know we startled the chief executive officer as he walked through. He went nuts but never found out it was us, as it could have come from any of the several offices around. Story 20. 10 days into working for the Red Cross, I crashed into a careless driver trying to park on a busy street, totaled their minivan, folded my truck's bumper into the tires. I was sober. I was forgiven. 90 days later, I backed the blood supply vehicle into a concrete post hidden by a bush. Forgiven. 6 months later, I had a blowout on the highway, nearly rolling a blood supply truck with a full load. Forgiven. Shortly after September 11th, I told a coworker to apologize to the trees for wasting oxygen. I was written up and suspended for a week. Story 21. dropped the entire internal database. The tool we used was not user-friendly, and I was still a trainee. Pressed Control A, then Control X, and it was gone. No confirmation, no warning, just immediately deleted. Lotus Notes, HCL Notes, if I recall correctly. Story 22. I worked pumping gas one summer and got a call from the owner that the police were there after closing. It turned out I forgot to lock up and a random person was helping themselves to snacks. Story 23. I destroyed a semiconductor manufacturing machine worth over $500,000. This machine is completely ruined, there is no saving it. The entire tool was damaged beyond repair. I received a promotion and a raise. The following week, a detailed presentation and guidelines were released on how to prevent the mistake I made. I would not recommend this as a method for career advancement. Story 24. I told my supervisors they were making a poor decision by not following a particular procedure. I had a meeting and they all agreed that, given the situation, I was not entirely wrong. However, I was advised to use more professional language in the future. Story 25. There has been a lot over the years. Here is a funny one. I was making packages of pulled chicken out of whole chickens that did not sell the day before. You have to take the wishbones out first because it is easy to miss them if you are not careful, and you definitely do not want small bones in the final product. The worst-case scenario is a child could get a broken piece of bone stuck in their throat. So I began collecting the wishbones and hiding them. I would put them in high places that most people would not notice, like on the fire sprinklers on the ceiling or on signs that hung from the ceiling. There were more than a dozen hidden in various places by the time someone noticed. It happened to be one of the top executives visiting the store who first found one. Those corporate types always have an eye for detail, so I am not surprised he saw it. I denied knowing anything about it in an overly sarcastic tone every time I was confronted about it. But they all knew it was me anyway because I was the only one tall enough to reach the places they were hidden. After being confronted and denying the accusation, I immediately proceeded to find more wishbones and remove them to avoid future accusations. Right in front of my boss, I pulled about 20 wishbones out of strange places until I finally said, "That appears to be all of them. I have a funny feeling that whoever did this will definitely never do it again." Story 26. When I was in my 20s, I worked at a manufacturing plant building cabinets. My dad was the chief financial officer. I worked in the drawer department next to the manufacturing line. One day, a guy on the line thought it would be funny to hold the safety down on the air-compressed nail gun and fire a 1-inch thin nail at my face. I had safety goggles on, but I was less than 10 feet away, and it hit me just above the eye. It hurt badly. I warned him if he did that again, I was going to hurt him. He laughed and shot another nail, which hit me in the chest. Blinded by rage, I had him bent over the table backwards with my hand on his throat and was pounding his face. He had a broken nose, a split-open eye, and a split lip. 3 managers saw it happen and pulled me off him. I had to go to human resources, and they said there were witnesses, so I was not fired. They sent him home, and he was suspended for a few days, but they told me not to go near him again. I said he assaulted me, and I defended myself. Legally, they had no ground to fire me. My dad was mad about it. He said, "I can't have my kid beating up guys in the factory." I replied, "If someone shot you in the face with a nail gun, what would you do?" He said, "Beat their ass." I said, "Exactly." Not another word was said. Story 27. Was that known about? I dropped a running server. That was not known about? I am pretty sure the massive security breach that caused my workplace to panic was me accidentally running a delete all files command in the wrong directory while trying to get a file upload program to clean up after itself. Story 28. Back in my wasted years, decades ago, I came to work intoxicated twice at 8 a.m. and was caught both times. I was sent home the second time and told to figure it out or else. I did and stayed there for almost 20 years. Story 29. I took a large dose of lysergic acid diethylamide and tried to call out of my line cook shift that evening. My manager was yelling at me, and I could not think of anything to say, so I showed up an hour late and cooked the entire shift. All I remember is the look of sheer panic I gave one of the servers and making pancakes with the pancake gun. Story 30. I worked in a grocery store in the late 2000s. Vaping was just a myth back then. We would take bong hits in the milk room because there were no cameras. Then we would run the entire length of the store to the back room and exhale out an open receiving door. Story 31. Gutted out the back of a storeroom while working as a porter in a hotel. Created a secret entrance with a hidden tunnel. Brought in snacks and bottles of water from the hotel. Made a private break room. Literally, hundreds of other people used that room, and it became an unofficial break area. People started drawing funny pictures on the walls and boxes. These drawings mocked the managers and upper staff, which was hilarious when they eventually found the room 6 months later. Nobody reported me, and I was not fired. Story 32. When I was in my early 20s, during the first month at one of my first jobs, I was listening to music through YouTube. I think this was allowed but never explicitly stated. A song came up with a video montage of a TV show. I was sitting there with Microsoft Word open on one screen and YouTube on the other. My boss quietly came around the cubicle, and I noticed her glance at YouTube, where it definitely looked like I was just watching TV. I thought for sure I was in trouble, but she never said anything. Luckily, she was the type of boss who did not care what you did as long as the work got done. Story 33. Accidentally replied to all on an email chain of over 200 people with just, okay. Felt like a celebrity for a day. Story 34. I worked at a local party and equipment rental chain one summer during college. Near the end of the day, my boss asked me to transfer a piece of equipment to another location. While backing up the trailer in the shop yard, I jackknifed the trailer and damaged the coupler so much that it jammed onto the hitch ball. After removing the coupler from the trailer and the hitch from my truck, my boss told me, "Don't worry. That's why they are detachable." Story 35. I quit a job but no one noticed, so I kept on working. I worked at a call center that was completely remote. On my second day on phones, I got a horrible call and quit. I logged off, turned off my internet, and went on Do Not Disturb. The rest of the day I felt horrible. I really needed the job because I was very broke. The next day I went in and made up a big lie in hopes of keeping the job. When I came in, I realized no one had even noticed I was gone. They thought I had clocked out incorrectly for a break and corrected it, so I got the whole day paid. I worked there for a few more months after that with no questions asked. Story 36. I was building an ultralinear sound source for testing reference microphones. For this, I needed a special flat sound source and found that a microphone with an open metal membrane and a high-voltage driver with 200-volt bias would be ideal. I built this, tested it, and completed all verification and validation. A day into production, the system failed. The microphone shorted. It was supplied with 200 volts via a 30 megohm resistor, so any fault would pull down the voltage. I replaced the capsule, which cost $3,500, recalibrated, and everything was fine. A day later, the same issue happened again. Another new capsule, another $3,500. And again the day after. Then I changed the capsule once more using our last one and observed the operator. After a few hours, failure occurred again. I noticed the operator improved over time and was able to insert the device under test faster. Faster insertion caused increased pressure, which made the metal membrane contact the base and short out. Because of 3 feet of shielded wire with 100 picofarads capacitance, the membrane would weld to the chassis, possibly the smallest weld in history. This was a design flaw and my fault. I added a resistor close to the microphone, and it worked for years after. I even had the expensive microphones repaired at a discount after honestly explaining the issue. I was not fired or reprimanded. It's a good place to work. Story 37. When I was a seaman, I used the insultinator over the one main circuit until the officer of the deck came up to the bridge and stopped me. I was told not to do that again. Story 38. Got caught illegally downloading movies. Information technology could not figure out why our network was so bogged down all the time. I had to show them how I bypassed their filters. Story 39. I accidentally pulled the silent alarm at work. 15 police officers in full tactical gear arrived later. I saw a button, and I did not know what it was, so I pushed it. Story 40. Early in my career as an industrial engineer for a major logistics company, I noticed in a SQL database that the names of two columns were switched. The parent column was labeled as child, and the child column was labeled as parent. Since this was affecting a report I was creating, I fixed it. However, someone who no longer worked there had set up a daily job to query this table. Instead of correcting the query, they had it written as select child as parent, parent as child. This program determined whether to transfer a package between our facilities and ship it from there or to give it to the United States Postal Service for shipping. The column name change caused us to send every package not destined for the same zip code as one of our facilities to the United States Postal Service. In the 3 hours it took to notice, diagnose, and fix the problem, it cost $90,000 in extra shipping fees. Somehow, I did not get fired. Story 41. Had just moved back home and needed a job fast. Started working on a dairy farm milking cows from 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. It was a shift of 5. One person would go out and bring in the next batch of cows while the other 4 worked in the parlor. After each group, a different person went outside. After pushing the barn's cows up to the parlor, you went back and cleaned out the stalls using a bobcat with a half-rear tractor tire, cut in a half circle on the front to push the waste to the waste pond. Workers were not allowed to drive up the alleys because too many had damaged rafters when lifting the front above the stalls to turn around and push the waste. So you had to back up the alleys. There were 3 crossovers, and you could back up fast without turning around if you counted the crossovers and slowed down after the third. One night, I must have missed the first crossover, had just counted 2, and slammed into the door at the end of the alley at full speed. There were metal gates in front of garage doors that rose up. I snapped the latch off the gate, which flew through the garage door, knocking it off its rails and destroying it. It made a loud bang and scared me. I was sure I would be fired, but I did not want to wait until 4 p.m., so I went in at 8 a.m. to see what the situation was. The owner was so thrilled he thought I had come in to help replace the door. He never said a word about firing me and sent me home after about 2 hours, saying I needed to rest before coming back to work at 4 p.m. I was 36 at the time, and all the other workers were between 18 and 23, so I guess he thought I had set a good example for the younger workers and even stopped me from apologizing, saying, "We have about 3 extra doors in the other barn. This happens enough that we bought backups." Story 42. Back in 2000, I was working in the live production database and tried to update a single row for one client's data, but I forgot the where clause in a cluttered SQL screen. It updated millions of rows. I ran the update and let it run in the background, not realizing it didn't return immediately, and forgot about it for 4 hours. The database administrators contacted me and performed a rollback, which took another 4 hours. It had locked the most used table of the largest database at the company. No one could do anything for almost 8 hours. This is a major telecommunications company in North America. I am still employed there. Story 43. Not me, but apparently my predecessor would get caught asleep at his desk nearly every day. He decided to retire right when the company made cameras mandatory for Microsoft Teams calls. Story 44. Allowed a coworker to use my computer to superimpose our boss's head onto a picture of a woman with 2 men. I then allowed the coworker to share this image with everyone in the office. The boss was best friends with the person who did it, so suddenly it was no longer a problem and no one got into any trouble. Story 45. I misplaced a $3,000 police radio. To be fair, I handed it to someone during a crisis and did not keep track of it. A random person was shooting random people, but still. Story 46. I worked in a pet store and often took cute stuffed toys to give to the girl I was dating at the time. Not squeaky ones, as that would give away the game, but a darling little bear or frog. I thought it was a small theft worth brightening the day of a couple struggling through college, work, and life. I also often managed the warehouse area myself. On slow days, if I finished my tasks early, I would climb up into the high steel stock areas to watch people and rest on pallets of dog food. Story 47. I was the manager of the customer support department at a startup with a small department and inadequate systems. I needed to log in every morning for anyone to begin work. The office opened at 9 a.m. One day, I woke up at 12:30 p.m. The CEO was in meetings all day, so he did not know until I told him in the afternoon. He just looked at me, said, "It happens," and turned back around. Story 48. I used to work as a bill collector, and we frequently used methamphetamine at our workstations. Story 49. I don't know if it was the dumbest thing or not, but I have made a few expensive mistakes. Like the time I plugged in an irreplaceable server into the wrong socket and blew the power supply that could not be replaced. Or the time I was updating a database and dropped all the tables because I missed a detail in the instructions. Or the time I was installing a central processing unit and bent some pins but didn't notice right away, so it got pretty bad. I'm not really sure why my unmedicated attention deficit hyperactivity disorder self is still in this industry. I should probably do some kind of paper job so I don't destroy things anymore. Maybe management. Story 50. Lord, have sincere mercy on my sweet baby soul. I have been debating whether to post this for days, which makes the point moot in any case. This question is my life right now. My boss invited our small team of 4 to his home for a meal with his wife as a sort of thank you. Super sweet. He cooked for us, it was going well, and everyone was having a nice time. Not the first time I have been to his house, by the way. I have worked for him for about 8 years now, and I have house sat for him and watched his dogs on occasion. At this point in the story, I want to stress that I do not drink often, maybe once in 6 months for an occasion or party. I proceeded to get extremely drunk and called my boss a word that you would be shocked to hear, even coming from an angry crackhead in a dumpster. A word that, if someone called your mom one, would lead to a fight immediately. A word that would turn heads in the dingiest biker bar, multiple times. I remember bits and pieces. Other details were filled in by one of my colleagues, whose eyes I vaguely remember being the size of saucers that night. I think someone was crying, probably me. I had a one-on-one sit-down with Mr. Boss himself the following workday. There were more tears, still me. I think I still have a job for now. We'll see. I will not be taking questions or elaborating at this time. All I will say is it was deeply humbling, and I would much prefer to pretend it never happened for now, maybe stew more on why I lost my entire mind. Sorry for the throwaway account. I'm sure you understand my utter mortification. Story 51. Not me, but my old workmate. We used to design and print programs for a variety of low-league football teams. In one of them, the manager wanted a Spot the Bear competition. If you bought the program and found the cartoon bear in it first, you would win a prize from the club. My workmate needed a stock image of a cartoon bear to quickly Photoshop behind a picture of a player, so he went on Google. I am not sure how many younger people will be familiar with the Petabear meme, but that was the one he chose, and he did not realize what it was until I pointed it out to him afterward. Story 52. I was a bank teller and had 2 cars in the drive-thru. I accidentally sent $500 and a driver's license to the wrong person. He drove off, but luckily we were able to call his wife and got it back within 10 minutes. Had that not been the case, I believe I would have lost my job. Story 53. I went to a bar with my senior manager on a Saturday night. I knew I had to work Sunday, but I wasn't too worried because both the office staff and all other management were off on Sundays. I figured worst case, I would be a little hungover and stay in my office all day. We started drinking shots, which led to buying Adderall with him. We ended up in a club with 2 Argentinian women that we brought back to his apartment. After calling the girls an Uber, I remembered I had to work in 2 hours, but my car wasn't at his place. I proceeded to drive his M5 to work, extremely high from all the Adderall and smelling like a Russian miner. As I pulled into the parking lot, our HR representative parked right next to me. The first words out of her mouth were, "Is that senior manager's name S-Car?" I made up a story and said it was my uncle's, then immediately tried to change the subject. I made small talk with her on the walk to the building. The entire time, I was convinced she knew that wasn't my uncle's car and wondered why she was there that day. It turned out she was there to work on an internal investigation for which I was a witness. I ended up spending about an hour in her office being interviewed about the investigation. Unless COVID took away her sense of smell or sight, She knew I was intoxicated and had no sleep, but she never called me out on it. I definitely should have been fired. Story 54. Yelled at an employee many times. I no longer do this. Did not follow procedure and was out of regulatory compliance many times. No promises since everyone does it. It is just a matter of what you can get away with. Since the statute of limitations has passed, I can confess that I stole many things from work. I no longer do this. There are cameras and people. Wasted a lot of time. I hate doing it, but sometimes when there is no work, you have to look busy or lose hours. Said and wrote inappropriate things. I avoided several consequences and still do not know how I got away with some things. I have since matured. Story 55. I'm not sure if this is unwise or irresponsible, but when I was a daycare teacher between the ages of 16 and 18, I would hit my pen on the classroom closet all the time. Story 56. It happened a lot in the United States Marine Corps, not just to me. The worst thing I did was not go to the medical checkup appointment when I said I would. I received negative counseling. I took advantage of the job security. Story 57. Entered the storage garage and mixed expired liquid products with new ones. We used a red dye in our business. I did not know some liquids had an expiration date. The boss told me he sometimes did the same to save money on new dye when supplies were short. Story 58. Ran over one laptop and left another on a commuter train. The laptop that was run over was repaired at no cost under AppleCare warranty. Story 59. Our plastic bags were a perfect fit for my small trash bin, so I would take one or two as needed. After a year, I had hundreds tucked away in my room and became focused on hoarding bags to see how large the number could get. I literally could not stop taking bags. Story 60. I used to work for a web hosting company in quality assurance. During my first week on the job, I logged into Web Host Manager for one of the shared servers. I accidentally deleted the shared IP address for the server, cutting off access to about 2,000 accounts. I also locked myself out of Web Host Manager. I was too new to fix it myself, so a senior developer fixed it for me. Luckily, a newer developer deployed code to production that brought down all 4 brands at the same time, so none of them worked. As a result, no one ever knew my mistake happened. Story 61. I was a nurse in an eye clinic and accidentally instilled the eye drop in the wrong eye. It was a dilating eye drop. I made an excuse that I would check the other eye as well to make sure both eyes were fine. I was praying the whole time. Story 62. I had a resale side hustle for Warhammer models where I used the company mailroom, materials, and business account to ship out orders for about 1.5 years. At least half of my shift was spent each day working on my side hustle. I made a significant amount of money doing that for a long time. No one ever caught on. Story 63. Smashed the nasal cavity of a superior officer with a broomstick. For losing the footage from a single-shot film shoot. Story 64. Shot multiple pencils into the drop ceiling 20 feet above. It was a quiet night during a blizzard, and I had already gone sledding on the mounds in the parking lot a couple of times. When the store finally closed in favor of a newly built one, the district manager was upset about the objects stuck up there, along with the smiley face in change glued to the wall. Story 65. Went through a rough stretch while working remote sales that was pretty autonomous. Just hit your numbers and no one asks questions. Before meetings or big sales, I would get nervous and take a shot of vodka. Got into a vicious cycle and ended up waking up, working for a bit, then taking an early morning break to shower and take a few shots, which of course became more and more. I wouldn't even remember what I did the day before at times and had to rely on notes that I always made sure to take. Somehow, I had good numbers and ended up getting promoted to a management role. I sobered up a bit, but still drank on and off during the workday. I genuinely wonder what I said in those meetings. I know I stayed pretty quiet. No one ever said anything, and I guess I hid it well, but there had to be people who knew I was intoxicated or had a strong feeling I was. Story 66. Started dating a coworker and doing things like kissing in public. In retrospect, we were foolish, and I am surprised it was tolerated for as long as it was. However, I then received a stern talk from my manager, and we dialed it all the way down. Story 67. Let the customer return a trailer. Apparently, trailers are considered vehicles, and that is not allowed. I did not get fired, but I did apologize profusely. Story 68. It is only unwise if you get caught. Therefore, engaging in a romantic relationship with a coworker is only unwise if you are caught doing it on the forklift. Story 69. Pallet jacket racing. As a supervisor, I encouraged the team to work faster and catch up to the other departments. The reward for my 6 team members was pallet jacket racing. We had a point system, and the person with the lowest points for the week bought lunch on Friday. Best job ever. Story 70. Not too bad in the grand scheme of things, but I once showed up to work over an hour late because I had fallen asleep on public transportation and missed my stop. I had been partying the night before and was running on barely a couple of hours of sleep. Story 71. I called my supervisor a derogatory name, then told her that she needs to pay me more if I have to continue working with her. After that, I took a week off immediately. Despite this, I still kept my job. Story 72. I would sometimes have jobs that should take all day but took an hour. So I would go home, get high, take a nap, then come back to work at the end of the day and clock out. For years, I never took paid time off at a job. The payout was great when I quit 300 hours. I used to sell marijuana out of pizza boxes and roll joints inside of pizza boxes. Being a teenager. Also, a company paid for an international trip for me without approving it or knowing. The money was gone. I'm a horrible employee, but my last 3 jobs were from companies asking me to work for them, so I'm doing something right. Story 73. Got blackout drunk while training someone. This was a serving job where drinking and drug use were fairly common. The restaurant was a party scene, and drinking on the job was often encouraged by the owner, as long as customers were buying drinks. I was working a double shift and started drinking with my regular customers during my lunch break. We kept the party going during my break, and I passed out. My friend came and got me from my house, which was very close to the restaurant. I played it off and told her I was fine. I went in for my second shift and told my trainee it was her night to shine. I let her take home all the tips. I kept drinking until my friends told the owner that I needed to be taken off the floor. The owner liked me, and otherwise I was a very good server. I woke up the next day in my uniform with a bathroom trash can placed against my head. I called and apologized. They said it was Saturday, they were busy, and to come in. They would talk about it later. I got an awful section that night, but in a surprising twist, Ric Flair came in. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the only place to accommodate him and his party was my section. I made $600 that night, and I could feel all the other servers' eyes on my back. I got a don't do that again and continued working there. Story 74. After 2 weeks at the advertising company, we had our summer dinner with an open bar. I was nervous, so I got pretty drunk. There was a taxi and ride-sharing strike, so the only way to get home was walking. Dinner was at the beach, and the walk home was about 2 hours. After 1 hour walking home with some colleagues, we passed near the office. My drunken mind decided that I had had enough, so I insisted to a coworker to give me the office keys because I was going to sleep there. He gave them to me. I opened the office door. The alarm went off. I panicked and ran out. On the street, I had a moment of clarity and went back upstairs. The alarm went off again. I didn't know the code. It was connected to the phone of the manager, who had been home for some time. 2 colleagues who were with me earlier came to the rescue, entered the code, spoke with the manager, and everything was fine. I grabbed a glass bottle of beer to celebrate, but it slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. I opened another. I didn't get fired and figured I must have been pretty good at my job. Story 75. Closed the shop at the end of the day, which was 10 p.m., and forgot to lock the front doors. Not only did I forget to lock them, but I left them wide open. They would lock from the inside and we would leave by the back door. Luckily for me, a regular customer and friend of my boss saw this as he was driving past and let him know. My boss was great and said, "You'll never do that again, will you?" I ended up working there for another 15 years. Story 76. I personally shut down the entire manufacturing operations of one of the largest companies in the United States for about a day. It cost the company tens of millions of dollars in lost production, possibly close to $100 million. I did not get fired. In fact, I barely had to answer for it. Story 77. I made several journal entries incorrectly because I was new and not familiar with the debit and credit system. This caused the income statement to show a $300,000 loss. My supervisor noticed the error, and I apologized. The next day, which was Saturday, I spent about 6 hours correcting everything. Needless to say, I did not make that mistake again. Story 78. I was 17, did not eat dinner, and was just sipping on my girlfriend's drinks all night. It got the better of me, and I ended up very drunk, throwing up, and so on. The next morning, I went to work feeling very hungover. I even fell asleep at the desk as the receptionist. Oops. Luckily, it was quiet, and the nurse on duty knew me. She told me to go and get a sausage roll to feel better and did not tell anyone. Story 79. When I was a 17-year-old dishwasher on the clock, I got high behind the dumpster and then rode on the back of a motorcycle, which crashed in the parking lot. My boss saw the whole thing and I still did not get fired. Story 80. Far too many things that I have learned from and am better for it. Just lucky I scraped through my 20s. Story 81. In human resources, a salaried employee resigned, and I forgot to process the termination. She received 4 extra weeks of pay. We recovered the overpayment. Story 82. Went out drinking until 4 a.m., thinking I had the next day off. I got a call at 5 a.m. from work asking where I was because I should have been clocked in. I got up and went to work completely drunk. Story 83. When I worked at a pizza place, it was not often we'd have to deal with rude customers. One day, I was having a bad day when a woman called with a massive order. 20 pizzas to be delivered to her work, and she needed them as soon as possible. It was just me and 2 other employees. We made the pizzas and I delivered them promptly. It turns out she was a prosecutor, and a sheriff's deputy answered the door at her office. When I got back to the store, I received a call from her saying that one of the pizzas had mushrooms on it, even though she did not request mushrooms. I told her it was clearly indicated in our system that she asked for mushrooms on one pizza. She called me a liar and demanded a full refund to her credit card. I told her okay and hung up the phone. In frustration, I punched the computer screen, breaking it. My 2 coworkers were stunned but stood by my side. I collected myself and realized I would definitely be fired for breaking the store's touchscreen monitor. However, my coworker saved me. He took apart the screen and removed the glass. The screen still turned on. When the manager came in an hour later, I told him that, for some reason, the touchscreen no longer worked. He said to just use the mouse. The end. Story 84. Car wash. I drank a really good swig from a customer's bottle of alcohol under the back seat. I got drunk and admitted it to the boss while telling him to stop talking because I was too drunk for his nonsense. He rolled his eyes at me and walked away. He never said a word about it. Story 85. Working at a bar during closing time, I knocked over the foosball table and was intimate with a woman in the walk-in cooler once. Story 86. Threatened a partially asleep coworker with a lighter. He was sleeping on top of boxes of fireworks in the warehouse of a fireworks supermarket. The manager did not like the guy either, so she was amused by my handling of the situation. We were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week the week leading up to July 4th in the United States, and I got bored working the overnight shift. I would challenge customers to arm wrestling for items we normally gave away for free. The same manager was just happy I was awake and actually assisting customers at 2 a.m. I worked collections at a call center and placed a bomb threat call on hold. It is important to note that it was 1997, and workplace violence was not a common occurrence in the United States at the time. Our office had not been equipped with caller identification yet, and my training manual did not cover bomb threats. So I put the caller on hold and alerted a supervisor. Even more surprisingly, the caller did not hang up. He actually waited to speak to a supervisor. Story 87. I once drilled a couple of holes in a non-structural part of a brand new passenger jet. I used the wrong size drill bit, and the plane was grounded for 3 days while several highly paid technicians fixed my mistake. Story 88. I was not doing well mentally years ago. I got drunk before and during work while working the yard gate at a lumber yard. My boss found out and drove me home. He told me not to do it again. I never heard about it again. Story 89. I backed into a builder's new truck when I worked in construction. The company I worked for paid the ticket I would have received. I only received a written warning. Story 90. My first adult job was right out of college with a decently large company. I left my laptop in a coffee bean because I carried it around in my laptop bag to look professional. It ended up getting stolen. I was scared to tell my boss, but he said, "Stuff happens." That day, I thought I was going to get fired for sure. Story 91. Maybe 15 years ago, before my time, a coworker had a small firearm in his cargo pants that he forgot about when he wore those pants to work one day at a government facility. He and his supervisor mentioned it quietly only once while I was there. I honestly could not believe it, but they were both honest people and they were not speaking to me specifically. I just overheard the conversation. Story 92. Back in the 1970s, I worked at a record warehouse with a group of people who smoked marijuana like myself. The receptionist was a very attractive woman who was fun to be around. So we invited her to lunch and gave her marijuana for the first time. When she returned to work, she was a mess and couldn't handle it, even though she was the receptionist. I had to tell my boss, who was very straight-laced, that my friends and I had gotten the receptionist intoxicated and that he needed to give her a ride home. I thought I might get fired, but it turned out the receptionist was attractive, and my boss enjoyed giving her a ride home and flirting with her. I got lucky because I thought I would be fired for getting intoxicated during my lunch hour. Story 93. I was working the front desk at a law firm while my supervisor was out. Someone spoke through the front door intercom and said, "I have the boxes." I buzzed them in, and they went directly to the main office to set down the boxes. They came in and out multiple times, placing about a dozen boxes in the middle of the floor of my supervisor's office, then left. Who were they? What was in those boxes? Where were they supposed to put the boxes? Surely not in the middle of the room. Who ordered the boxes? All good questions that I did not think to ask. Thankfully, when my supervisor came in, she simply said, "Oh great, the boxes are here. All's well that ends well." Story 94. I yelled "fucking asshole" on a conference call. Obviously, I thought I was on mute. People were so shocked they did not say anything. I just went on and pretended it was not me. I never got into trouble for it. Story 95. Used marijuana before work, went home and used more marijuana on my lunch break. So I came back more impaired. This was a daily occurrence. Slept with several coworkers, not all at once. Story 96. When I was 18 or 19, I worked at an office supply store. Behind one of the shelves, I wrote in big bold letters that my name was here. I did not get fired. I eventually quit, and one time I returned to find that they had reorganized the store, but my graffiti was still there for everyone to see. It must have been up there for 3 years. Story 97. I worked in sales, and one of my client companies had a liaison who was my best friend. We often had sales call lunches together, eating and drinking at the expense of the company I worked for. We would go to an early lunch at 11 and drink literally all afternoon. Sometimes we would use substances in the parking lot before I attended meetings with my employees, as I also held a human resources position. I worked for a terrible company owned by a difficult family who did not pay me well and treated me poorly. I do not regret anything I did on that job. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.